Be me, 58, operations supervisor at Meridian Power and Light. Mid-sized municipal utility serving about 340,000 people in a Pennsylvania River Valley. 3 substations, 1,400 miles of distribution line, 1 aging coal-to-gas peaker plant we kept on standby. Been here since I was 22. Started as a ground man, then lineman, then journeyman, then crew lead. Worked my way up to ops supervisor in 2009. I don't sit in meetings if I can help it. I sit in the control room. That's where the work happens. Our crew was 47 people total. Linemen, troubleshooters, substation techs, dispatch. Tight group, most of them I'd hired myself. Average tenure was 19 years. You don't get that in this industry anymore. People bounce after 3 years now, chasing union pay in Texas. We kept ours because we treated them right and the work felt like it mattered. Heart of the operation was a man named Earl. Master electrician, 64 years old. Started at Meridian in 1978. 46 years on the property. Knew every transformer by serial number. Knew which feeders had been spliced wrong in 1987 by a contractor who'd been fired the next week. Knew that Substation 2's old GE relays would chatter if the humidity went above 78% in August. Knew because he'd been there when they were installed. Earl wasn't loud. Wasn't political. Wasn't a guy who told stories at the Christmas party. He was the guy who answered the phone at 3 a.m. when a storm took down a feeder and told the crew exactly which valve to close before they got electrocuted. He'd done that probably 200 times in his career. Saved more lives than I can count. Most of them never knew it. Earl had no kids. His wife passed in 2019. The grid was his family. He was scheduled to retire in March 2027. Already trained 2 younger guys, Diego and Aaron, to take over the trickier parts of his job. Diego had 9 years in. Aaron had 6. Neither of them was Earl, but they were on their way. That was the plan. That was always the plan. Then last spring, our utility got a new director of operations. Woman named Vanessa Lockhart. 42 years old. MBA from Wharton, MPA from somewhere in California. Came from a consulting firm that specialized in utility transformation. Whatever that means. Hired by the board to modernize the workforce culture. Whatever that means. I met her on a Wednesday in April. She'd been on the job 4 days. Walked into the control room in heels. Heels in a control room. If you've never worked in one, just trust me, it's not the footwear for it. Vanessa, are you the supervisor? Me? I'm Frank, yeah. Vanessa, I'd like to schedule one-on-ones with each of your team members. Me, what for? Vanessa, I'm conducting a culture assessment. I want to understand the lived experiences of our frontline workforce. Me, they're working. Vanessa, I understand, but this is a priority for the board. Me, I'll see what I can do. She handed me a stack of intake forms. Each one was 4 pages. Asked things like, describe a time you felt unsafe in your professional environment, and rate your perception of inclusivity on a scale of 1 to 10. I put them in the break room. 3 guys filled them out. The rest used them as coffee coasters. I didn't tell Vanessa. May 2025. Vanessa starts pushing what she calls Phase 1. Mandatory bi-weekly culture sessions. 1 hour, every other Wednesday. The crew has to come off the line and sit in a conference room. Talk about feelings. Listen to her present slides about psychological safety. The first session, Earl raised his hand. Earl, ma'am, with respect, I've had a thermal imaging job at Substation 3 this afternoon. Bus connector's been running hot for 2 weeks. Need to scope it before we lose the bushing. Vanessa, I'm sure your colleagues can handle it. Earl, nobody else has the IR cameras certified for our voltage class. Vanessa, then we'll reschedule the inspection. Earl looked at me. I looked at the floor. Vanessa, Earl, this is the new culture. We don't put equipment ahead of people anymore. Earl didn't say anything for the rest of the session. Just sat there with his hands in his lap. After it was over, he came to my office. Earl, Frank. Me? Yeah, Earl. Earl, she's gonna get someone killed. Me? She's just trying to settle in. Earl, she doesn't understand what we do. That's not a personality flaw. That's a hazard. I knew he was right. I told him I'd talk to her. I did. It didn't help. June 2025. Vanessa rolls out Phase 2, restructured org chart. The master electrician role gets renamed. Now it's senior technical contributor. Still Earl, same job, different title. But she also creates a new layer above him. Technical equity coordinator. Hires a woman from outside named Brielle, 32 years old. Background in environmental policy and infrastructure justice. Has never worked at a utility. Has never wired a panel. Has never seen the inside of a substation. Brielle's job, on paper, is to ensure equitable access to technical advancement opportunities. Her actual job is to sit between Earl and Vanessa and translate. Translate what? I'm not sure. Earl already speaks English. Brielle's first week, she sits in on a switching procedure briefing. This is a serious meeting. We're planning a maintenance outage on a 69 kV feeder. One wrong sequence and somebody dies. Or the lights go off for 80,000 people. Earl is leading the briefing, walking through the steps. Halfway through, Brielle interrupts. Brielle, I want to flag the language we're using. Earl, excuse me. Brielle, we keep saying master and slave for the relay configurations. That terminology has problematic origins. Earl looks at me. I look at Diego. Diego looks at the ceiling. Earl, ma'am, that's the IEEE standard nomenclature. That's what's printed on the relay itself. Brielle, we can update our internal vocabulary. Earl, we can't update what's printed on the relay. And if we use different words in the briefing than what's on the equipment, somebody's going to make a mistake. And that mistake could open a breaker on a hot bus. And that's how a lineman dies. Brielle, I think we can find inclusive language that's still technically accurate. Earl, I think we should finish the briefing before the outage window closes. The briefing finished. The outage went fine. But Brielle filed a complaint with HR. Said Earl had been dismissive and had centered technical authority over inclusive practice. HR sent Earl a written warning. 46 years on the job. First write-up of his career. He showed it to me. Didn't say anything. Just slid it across the desk. I went to Vanessa's office that afternoon. Vanessa, you can't write him up for that. Vanessa, he created a hostile environment for Brielle. Me, he answered her question. Vanessa, he used a tone. Me, he used the only tone he has. He's been speaking like that since 1978. That's how power engineers talk. They're direct because if they're not direct, somebody dies. Vanessa, that's exactly the culture we're trying to change, Frank. I left her office, walked out to the parking lot, sat in my truck for 10 minutes, called my wife, told her something bad was going to happen. I just didn't know what or when. July 2025, 2 weeks of the warmest summer on record. Heat index hitting 106 by 11 a.m. Load on the grid was running 94% of capacity by 2 p.m. most days. This is when the system is at its most vulnerable. Transformers running hot, conductors sagging, every connection in the network under stress. Earl was working 14-hour days, crawling around in substation yards in 110-degree heat, doing thermal scans, retorquing connections, watching the SCADA screens, catching problems before they became failures. That's what he did. That's what he'd always done. Mid-July, Earl flagged an issue with a transformer at Substation 2. Tap changer was sticking. Old equipment, manufactured in 1979. He recommended we pull it offline for service. 2-day outage. Switch the load to the backup transformer, do the repair, bring it back. Standard procedure. He'd done it 30 times in his career. He sent the recommendation to Vanessa. Brielle responded, said the outage would disproportionately impact equity-vulnerable neighborhoods. Asked Earl to provide a social impact assessment before the work could be approved. Earl's response, in writing, the transformer doesn't care which neighborhood loses power if it fails. It will fail, and then everyone connected to it loses power for a week instead of 2 days. I have a copy of that email. I keep it in a folder. I'll come back to that folder later. Vanessa called Earl into her office the next morning. She had Brielle and an HR rep with her. Earl came out 20 minutes later. Came straight to my office. Earl, I'm fired. Me what? Earl. Effective immediately. Insubordination, hostile communication, refusal to engage with equity protocols. They're walking me out at noon. I stared at him. Couldn't speak for a second. Me? Earl. Earl, it's done, Frank. Don't burn yourself trying to undo it. Me? What about the transformer? Earl, tell Diego to watch it. Tell him to keep eyes on the temp readings every hour. If it crosses 95 Celsius, kill the load. Don't wait for permission. Me? Earl, you have 46 years. You have 8 months to retirement. Earl, apparently I have 0 months to retirement. He didn't even raise his voice. He shook my hand, walked back to his desk, packed a small box, one photo of his wife, one IEEE handbook from 1982, one coffee mug that said, "World's okayest electrician." His daughter had given it to him as a joke. He didn't have a daughter. It was an inside joke with the crew. I helped him carry the box to his truck. 2 security guards walked behind us, like Earl was going to do something, like he was going to throw a punch on his way out. Earl shook my hand again at the truck. Earl, watch the system, Frank. And take care of Diego. He's good, but he's not ready. Me? I will. Earl, I'm sorry. Me? For what? Earl, for not figuring out how to make her listen. He drove away. I stood in the parking lot. The heat off the asphalt was something you could feel in your chest. Day 1 of 48. I went straight to Vanessa's office. Didn't knock. Me? You can't fire Earl. Vanessa. It's done. Me? Vanessa. That man knows things about this grid that aren't written down anywhere. Operating quirks, undocumented modifications, vendor contacts. You can't replace 46 years of memory in a week. Vanessa. We have documentation for everything that matters. Me? No. You have documentation for what someone thought to write down. Earl is the documentation for everything else. Vanessa. Frank, I appreciate your concern, but this is a leadership decision. We're moving forward. Substation 2 has a sticking tap changer. Earl flagged it last week. Brielle blocked the outage request. Vanessa. Brielle requested additional context. Me? Earl gave you context. He told you it was going to fail. Vanessa. We'll have Diego do an assessment. Me? Diego's a good tech, but he's not Earl. Vanessa. Then he'll have to grow into the role. That's how succession works. I want to find Diego. Told him what was happening. Told him Earl said to watch the temps every hour. Diego nodded. Didn't say anything. His face went pale. He'd worked under Earl for 9 years. Knew exactly what we were losing. Hour 6. Diego sets up a manual monitoring schedule. 1 person on substation 2 around the clock. Eyes on the SCADA. Eyes on the gauges. Hourly walkarounds. It's a stopgap. It's not a fix. The tap changer is still sticking. The load is still climbing every afternoon. The forecast says 102 tomorrow. Hour 14. I'm in the control room when the first anomaly hits. Substation 2, phase B voltage starts oscillating. Just a flicker. 0.4% deviation. Most operators wouldn't notice. Diego notices. Diego, Frank, look at this. I look. Me. How long has it been doing that? Diego, started 12 minutes ago. Coming and going. I think the tap changer is hunting. Me. Call Aaron in. And give me Brielle on the phone. We need outage authorization. Diego calls Aaron. I call Brielle. She doesn't pick up. I call Vanessa. She doesn't pick up. It's 9 p.m. They've gone home. I leave voicemails on both. Hour 18. The voltage oscillation is getting wider. 0.7% now. Aaron is on site at substation 2. Reports the transformer is humming louder than normal. Says he can hear the tap changer mechanism trying to operate and failing. Aaron, it's stuck between positions, Frank. It's going to throw the regulator into protection mode. And when it does, it's going to trip the bus. Me, how long? Aaron, I don't know. Hours, maybe. Could be sooner. I try Vanessa again. Voicemail. I try Brielle. Voicemail. I leave a third message on each. This is Frank. We have an emerging failure at Substation 2. I need outage authorization to switch the load before we lose the bus. Call me back immediately. Hour 22. Still no callback. The oscillation is now at 1.2%. Bus protection relays will trip at 2.5%. If the bus trips uncontrolled, we lose 60,000 customers. Hospitals, traffic lights, the whole east side. I make a decision. I call our director of engineering, a guy named Phil who's been here almost as long as me. Phil, what do you need, Frank? I tell him. Phil, where's Vanessa? Me, not answering. Phil, Brielle? Me, not answering. Phil, Frank, I can't authorize an outage without operation sign-off. You know that. It's policy. Me, Phil, the bus is going to trip in the next 4 hours. Phil, then keep trying Vanessa. I'll try her too, but until I get authorization, my hands are tied. I hang up. I sit in the control room. Watch the oscillation graph climb. 1.4%, 1.6%. I think about Earl. What he would do. He would have called Vanessa, gotten voicemail, and then opened the breakers anyway. He would have eaten the write-up, saved 60,000 customers. Earl was gone. I wasn't Earl. I picked up my phone. I called Earl. Hour 24. Earl picks up on the second ring. Earl, Frank. Me? Earl, I need you. Earl, what's happening? I tell him. Tap changer's failing, no authorization. Earl listens. Earl, open the 4 to 7 breaker, switch the load to the backup, kill the tap changer's coil circuit. That'll buy you 12 hours minimum. Long enough for daylight. Long enough for somebody to authorize the outage. Me? Earl, I don't have authority to do that. Earl, Frank, I'm not at the company anymore. I can't tell you what to do. But if I were still there, I'd do it myself. And I'd take whatever came after. Because the alternative is the bus trips. And then it's not 60,000 customers. It's the cascade. Me, what cascade? Earl, if Substation 2's bus trips uncontrolled, the load shifts to Substation 1 and 3. Both of those are already running at 91% on a hot night. They can't absorb the surge. They'll trip too, and then the whole regional grid sees the demand drop and starts adjusting. And if your peaker plant doesn't respond fast enough, you start backfeeding. And then you've got a regional event. Could go all the way to the PJM interconnect. Umi, Jesus. Earl, yeah, Earl. Frank, do what you have to do. Don't tell anyone I told you. I love you, brother. Save the grid. He hung up. I sat there for 30 seconds. I made the call. Diego, I'm here. Me, open 4 to 7. Switch to backup. Kill the coil circuit. Diego, Frank, do we have authorization? Me, we have my authorization. That's the only one that matters right now. Diego, copy. I heard him give the order. Heard Aaron on the radio confirming. Heard the breakers operating. Watched the SCADA screen. The oscillation flattened. The load shifted clean to the backup transformer. System held. I exhaled for the first time in 6 hours. Texted Earl. It worked. He texted back 2 minutes later. Good. Now go make peace with whatever happens to you tomorrow. Hour 32. Vanessa called me back at 7:14 a.m. Vanessa. Frank, I got your messages. What's going on? Me. We had to switch the load at Substation 2 last night. Tap changer was failing. I made the call without authorization. Vanessa. You did what? Me. I opened a breaker without sign-off. It was an emergency. You didn't pick up. Brielle didn't pick up. I made the call. A long pause. Vanessa. Frank, that's a serious protocol violation. We need to talk about this in person. Come to my office at 9. Me. I'll be there. Hung up. Hour 35. I'm in Vanessa's office. Brielle is there. HR rep is there. Phil from engineering is there. Vanessa. Frank, you violated protocol. Me. I prevented a cascading outage. Brielle. You acted unilaterally. Me. I acted because nobody answered the phone. Vanessa. We need to discuss disciplinary action. Phil. Vanessa, before we go down that road, I want to see the SCADA logs. And I want to talk to Diego. Frank's call may have prevented a much larger event. Vanessa. Phil, this isn't your department. Phil, substation operations is exactly my department. The meeting got tense. I sat there for 40 minutes while they argued. Vanessa wanted to suspend me. Phil wanted to commend me. Brielle wanted me written up for ignoring chain of command. HR didn't know what to do. Eventually, Vanessa said she'd review the incident. Sent me back to the control room. I went. I should have known what was coming. Hour 38. On my desk. Aaron radios in from Substation 1. Aaron. Frank, I'm getting a temperature alarm on Transformer. Top oil's at 82 Celsius. Climbing fast. Me, how fast? Aaron. 2 degrees in the last 20 minutes. Me, what's the load? Aaron. 98%. Me, of capacity? Aaron. Of nameplate. I felt my stomach drop. Substation 1 was carrying part of the load that Substation 2 had shed when we switched. The math was supposed to work. It wasn't working because the load was higher than the model predicted, because it was 103 outside, because air conditioners were running everywhere, because we were in the worst heat wave in Pennsylvania history, and nobody had run the simulation that morning. Earl would have run it. Earl had been running it every morning for 25 years. Nobody else thought to. Hour 40. Transformer A at Substation 1 hits 95 Celsius. That's the threshold for emergency load shed. I call Vanessa. She picks up this time. We need to shed 15% of load right now, or we're going to lose Substation 1. Vanessa, how long do we have? Me, an hour, maybe. Vanessa, I need to talk to Brielle about which neighborhoods to prioritize. Me, Vanessa, we don't have time for that. The shed is automatic if I trigger it. It rotates by feeder, not by neighborhood. Vanessa, Frank, we cannot make load decisions without an equity. Review. Me? Vanessa, please. Vanessa, I'm calling Brielle now. Hold the trigger. Me? Vanessa, the transformer is going to fail. And when it does, it's not going to be 15%. It's going to be 100%. Vanessa, hold the trigger, Frank. That's an order. I held the trigger. God help me. I held the trigger. Hour 42. Transformer A hits 102 Celsius. The internal protective relay activates. Transform deep offline. Bus loses voltage. Substation 1 dark. 120,000 customers lose power instantly, including the hospital on Tillman Street, including the city's main pumping station, including the traffic control center. The load shifts to Substation 3. Substation 3 is already at 93% capacity. It can't absorb the surge. 20 seconds later, Substation 3's main breaker trips on overcurrent. Another 90,000 customers lose power. The cascade reaches the interconnect. The peaker plant tries to ramp up. The peaker plant has a fuel valve issue that Earl had flagged in March. Earl had recommended a parts replacement. The work order had been put on hold pending Brielle's supplier diversity review. The valve doesn't open. The peaker can't start. The grid frequency drops. The protective relays at the substation that wasn't even part of our problem trip in self-defense. 15 minutes after Transformer A failed, the entire regional grid is dark. Hour 42 to hour 44. 340,000 people without power. 3 counties. 7 hospitals running on backup generators. 4 of those generators fail within the first hour because they hadn't been load tested in 14 months. That's a Brielle thing too. She'd reclassified generator testing as deferred maintenance because the testing schedule was based on outdated equity blind metrics. I am not making that up. It's in an email. I have an email. Hour 44. I'm in the control room. Vanessa shows up. She's pale. Vanessa. Frank, what do we do? Me? Call Earl. Vanessa. We can't. He's terminated. There are legal issues with bringing him back. Me? Vanessa. There are 340,000 people in the dark. 2 of those hospitals are running ventilators on a generator that's leaking diesel. Call Earl. Vanessa stared at me. She stared at the SCADA screen. She stared at the control room phones, all of them ringing. Mayor's office, county emergency management, the governor's office, the FBI. Not because of any crime, just because the FBI calls during major infrastructure events. Vanessa. Frank. Will you call him? Me? I already did. Earl's on his way. He'll be here in 20 minutes. Earl walked into the control room at 11:47 p.m., wearing the same Carhartt jacket he wore when they walked him out 44 hours earlier. Didn't say a word to Vanessa. Didn't say a word to Brielle, who was sitting in the corner crying. Walked straight to the SCADA console. Sat down. Pulled up the system overview. Picked up the radio. Earl. Diego, you on? Diego, I'm at Substation 1, Earl. Earl, tell me what you see. For the next 6 hours, Earl ran the recovery. I made coffee. I called crews back in from off shift. I lied to the mayor on the phone about how long it would take. Earl restored the grid in pieces. Black start procedure. You don't just turn the lights back on. You bring up one substation at a time. Synchronize the frequency. Bring up small loads first to stabilize. Then build outward. If you do it wrong, you trip the whole thing again. Earl knew how to do it right, because he'd done it twice before in his career. 1991 ice storm. 2003 Northeast blackout. His third time. By 6 a.m. the next morning, we had 60% of the system back online. By noon, 90%. By the end of the day, 99%. The hospital on Tillman never lost a patient. One man died at home. Oxygen concentrator failed, no backup. 89. A lung disease. His daughter found him at 4 a.m. She didn't know the power had gone out. She just thought he'd passed in his sleep. The coroner caught it later. Cause of death listed as respiratory failure secondary to power outage. His name was Walter Petrosky. I went to his funeral. His daughter didn't know who I was. I shook her hand, said I was a co-worker of someone who'd known him. Bleat. Couldn't tell her I was the one who held the trigger. Hour 48 and beyond. The board meets emergency session. 3 days after the lights come back on. Vanessa is there. Brielle is there. Phil is there. I'm there. Earl is not invited. Even after he restored the grid. That's the kind of thing that tells you everything. Vanessa presents her version. A series of unforeseen technical failures compounded by aging infrastructure. The rapid response of our team. Important lessons about modernization. Phil presents next. Phil has a binder. The binder is 2 inches thick. Inside the binder are Earl's emails going back for months. Every flagged issue, every blocked outage request, every social impact assessment Brielle had required before letting maintenance happen. Every email Vanessa had ignored. The board reads in silence for 40 minutes. The chair, a retired engineer named Margaret, looks up. Margaret, Vanessa, did you fire Earl Hutchinson? Vanessa, I terminated his employment for protocol violations. Margaret, did Brielle Tanner block 14 maintenance work orders in the last 4 months? Brielle, I requested additional documentation on certain outages. Margaret, did one of those blocked outages involve the transformer that failed at Substation 1? Brielle, I can't speak to specific causation. Margaret, Phil, can you speak to specific causation? Phil, yes. The tap changer failure at Substation 2 cascaded to Substation 1 because we couldn't preemptively manage the load. We couldn't preemptively manage the load because the maintenance outage was blocked. It was blocked by Brielle. The block was approved by Vanessa. Earl predicted this exact failure mode in writing on June 17th. I have the email. The room went quiet. Margaret, Vanessa, you're suspended pending investigation. Brielle, you're terminated effective immediately. Phil, I want a recovery plan on my desk in 72 hours. And I want Earl Hutchinson back at his desk by Monday. Vanessa, I'd like to respond. Margaret, you'll respond to the investigators. This meeting is over. The aftermath. Earl came back the following Monday. Worked another 14 months. Trained Diego and Aaron more thoroughly than before. Wrote down everything. filled 3 notebooks with the unwritten knowledge that had lived in his head for 46 years. Anti-Vanessa documentation, he called it. Said if anyone ever tried to fire someone for protocol violations again, the paper trail would be there. He retired in May 2026. 8 months late, the crew threw him a party. Diego made a speech. Aaron made a speech. I made a speech. Earl said 5 words. Watch the system. Watch each other. Sat down. Vanessa was officially fired 3 weeks after the blackout. The investigation found systemic failure of leadership judgment. She didn't fight it. I heard later she got hired by a consulting firm in Chicago, doing the same thing. Utility transformation. Same MBA pitch deck, different victims. Brielle filed a wrongful termination claim. Argued she'd been scapegoated for systemic infrastructure failures. The claim was dismissed. She went on a podcast circuit for a while, talking about being the woman who took the fall for legacy engineering culture. I stopped following her after the 3rd interview. Walter Petrosky's daughter never sued. I kept waiting for the lawsuit. It never came. I went to her house once, 6 months later, brought a casserole, told her the truth, that her father had died because of decisions made in a control room, that I'd been one of the people in that control room, that I was sorry. She listened. She thanked me for the casserole. She didn't yell, didn't cry, just said, "My father lived 89 years. He outlived the average by 13. You don't get to carry his death, that's mine. But I'm glad you came." I drove home, sat in the truck for 20 minutes, then went inside and held my wife. The grid is fine now. Diego is the new master electrician. Aaron is his number 2. They run the morning simulations. They write things down. The tap changer at Substation 2 was replaced in November 2025. Cost the utility $4.2 million in repair, recovery, and emergency response, plus settlements to commercial customers who lost product, plus a federal infrastructure compliance fine, plus the soft costs nobody calculates. The trust of 340,000 people. The death of one. For what? So a director could prove she could restructure a culture. So a coordinator could insist on equity reviews for transformer maintenance. So an MBA could tell a 46-year master electrician that his tone was hostile. The grid didn't care about any of it. The grid runs on physics. Physics doesn't care about your framework. It cares about temperature and load and whether the breakers are in the right position. It cares about whether the person watching the screen at 3 a.m. knows what the screen is telling them. Earl knew. For 46 years, Earl knew. And when they walked him out, the knowledge walked out with him. Not because he took it with him out of spite, because nobody else had been allowed to learn it. Because the time he would have spent training his replacements was the time he was sitting in mandatory culture sessions, listening to a slide deck about psychological safety, made by someone who'd never seen a relay. Feminist director fired the master electrician. The entire power grid collapsed within 48 hours. 1 man died. 3 counties went dark for $0.2 million in damages. And the director got hired by another utility, doing the same job to the same kind of people. I'm 59 now, 3 years from retirement. I think about Walter Petrosky every day. I think about the moment I held the trigger. I think about Earl walking out of the park